At a small post in Washington, D.C., Marine pride, history and tradition live on. Marine Barracks at 8th and I Streets is the oldest post in the Corps, and for 100 years, from the early 1800s, it was Marine Corps headquarters.
Let's see. The oldest post in the Corps, 1801. What an honor. Marines? Marines? Hoorah. I'm here to do a rapid fire PME. The topic, Lieutenant General John Archer Lejeune, who from 1920 to 1929 had 3 terms as the 13th Commandant of the Marine Corps. Look at me closely. Look in my eyes. The pronunciation of Lejeune family name is incontrovertibly, rock hard, Lejeune. You can make a wager on it. Some time ago, Leatherneck, I've done some journalism. As the UPI gentleman here will testify, pretty mediocre journalism. But I've done some journalism. And the Lejeune family and Colonel Ford at Leatherneck asked me to do a story on Lejeune and see about getting the pronunciation right. Well, I didn't want to be hanging out there, so I went down to Louisiana. And the Lejeune family was so happy to have somebody get this corrected, a whole generation, as was misspeaking the name. They made me one of 5 judges in Mardi Gras. One of 5 judges in Mardi Gras. The word etymology, anybody here have the definition? Come on. Okay. Claude Solani. The definition is, of course, the study of words and their origin. Fascinating science. The word colonel started in Italy. It was mean colonel, in the column of troops. And when that word got to France, it got an R in it. Colonel John Bates reminded me the other day that we don't say corpse. And quite a few people remind me every time they go to the nation's capital, they pronounce it Washington. And other people talk about tomato, tomato, and potato, potato, and all those things. Those are all a lot of frivolous comparisons. General Lejeune, there's nothing frivolous about General Lejeune. General Lejeune graduated from the Naval Academy after going to LSU, running out of money, got in the Naval Academy, and graduated in 1888. He was then, the Naval Academy then assigned him to be, after 2 years of midshipman, he was supposed to finish his midshipman term and become Ensign Lejeune, the Naval Corps of Engineers. Why? Because he was second academically in his class. And the Department of the Navy said, anybody that academically high, embarrassing, cannot become a Marine. Well, General Lejeune had one quality that triumphs over everything. And you Marines all have it, or you wouldn't be here today. Without it, you couldn't get through Paris Island, the only boot camp. That quality, as you all know, is determination. Triumphs over everything. He went to his 2 senators from Louisiana, the governor, and for 2 years he just was determined to become a Marine. And at the end of that, the Navy said, if you get the Marine Corps to request you, we'll let you go. And they did, and the rest was history. He had a long, successful run. His family came from a long military family. They're genteel and kind people down in the state of Louisiana, small parish. One of their famous writers wrote 17 books, one of the 200 descendants. Brian Costello said, Mr. Brent, every time we hear the June word, that's the way we refer to it, the June word, on television, we cringe. 5 Marines, today's Marines, 2 Lance Corporals, 2 Corporals, and 1 Lieutenant, all went to boot camp a year or so ago, a couple years ago, and I interviewed them. If they got to boot camp, they would have been better off if their name was Leibowitsky, because the minute they got to boot camp, their sergeants said, we don't say it that way anymore. One tried to get his name said correctly 3 times until he was kind of afraid. You know, DIs can be kind of imposing. So Years ago, the DIs used to teach it the correct way. Those days are over. General Lejeune had a long, storied military career. He went to, he was in the Mexican War and many other skirmishes. When he got to Cuba as a lieutenant colonel, he founded Marine Corps Association. You'd be surprised at all the foundations, which I'm about to tell you about. Then he went on through his career. He finally arrived back here in Washington as a one-star brigadier general and was offered the chance to be the next commandant of the Marine Corps, and it was 1917. He turned it down because there's a war going on in France. He then went over to the Marine Brigade, working for the Army Expeditionary Forces, General Pershing. And before you knew it, they were doing such an excellent job. Pershing made him the first Marine in charge of an Army division, the 2nd Army Division. He set a record. He went behind enemy lines as a 2-star. He got promoted. And he was there to check the topography behind enemy lines. He also divided his forces for a night attack, one of the critical attacks that went to Armistice Day in 1918, November 11th, another day that occurs after a really good one, after the biggest birthday. So anyway, he helped win the war. He was also, by the way, the first Marine back there in France, first Marine officer to go to the rear of the child line. But I think you were a 2nd lieutenant back there, weren't you then, Colonel Smith? You were probably in the child line with him. So, he comes back home, here to Washington, D.C. They make him the 13th Commandant for 3 tours. That was the good news. Parade, New York, he and the Marines were quite the heroes. However, the Army Chief of Staff, the War Department, probably a better name for it, the War Department, and the Army Chief of Staff, who were the powers to be in those days, were really upset. What did they do? The Army Chief of Staff made a vow to dissolve the Marine Corps. Anybody he felt worthy could rotate over to the Army. General Lejeune took umbrage with that. What was his job? When he became Commandant, he walked the passageways of Congress. He got to know everybody, and he fought to have the Marine Corps we have today, and he won. He created traditions. He created a precursor to your evening parade. He had some sunset parades and things of that nature. He created the birthday message, the birthday ball, but not for the reasons we enjoy today. He did them to save the Marine Corps, and every historian will tell you that. Yesterday, I was at Lexington, Kentucky, where he spent his last 9 years. There's a statue there, and underneath is an engraved, the heading for an editorial. It was published many places. John Archer Lejeune, the greatest leatherneck of them all. So we came back here. Now just imagine, I was talking to a historian at the Marine History Division a few days ago, Colonel Niemeyer, Lieutenant Colonel, and he said, if John Archer had become an ensign in the Navy, it was almost unthinkable. Because he created the Marine Corps Institute, the Marine Corps Association, the Marine Corps League, the Marine Corps Schools at Quantico. He's the 1st and 3rd general there. He also created a research for amphibious vessels, amphibious warfare. And gentlemen, Marines, he created the Fleet Marine Force. Any historian will tell you, without that Fleet Marine Force and his back and John Archer Lejeune's endeavors, all the actions in the Pacific would have been Army actions. There would have been no Marine division. You know that little island with the hill where the flag went up? Don't even think about it. It's so unthinkable. It would have been an entire Army show. In my process of doing research, there's a gentleman named Dr. Tom Klinger. He's the chair of the Italian and French departments at Tulane University. Says Lejeune's, which came from Switzerland, spoke French, ended up down there in Louisiana, and the accents are a combination of Creole, Acadian, not Cajun, but Creole and Acadian, and it's been that way for over 200 years. Dr. Klinger told me, he said, Mr. Brent, when people have said something so wrong for so long, it's pretty hard to get them to change. I said, Tom, you're wrong. That may be true with civilians. They may be a little slower. But we're talking about Marines. Marine, can you tell me what we do when we hear the Marines hymn? We're all alone in some stadium or whatever. What do we do? Yes, not only do we stand at attention. We're the only branch that does that. Respect and honor are hallmarks.